All right, let's jump right in. Today we're diving into Acts 26.132,
Ah, yes.
the story of Paul's defense before King Agrippa.
It's interesting because this passage really highlights the power of words, especially when they're delivered with, well, like clarity and precision.
Like Paul does here.
Yeah, like Paul does
It's
here.
like he's giving us a master class in communication.
He really is. And the thing is, it's not just about being a good speaker, it's about using those words to bridge gaps. We're talking about a story that's almost 2,000 years old, and yet it still resonates with us today.
Right, and it's like we can learn so much from how Paul approaches this whole situation.
Exactly. So to set the scene, we have Paul standing trial, accused by the Jews.
Oh, okay.
And he's given this chance to defend himself before King Agrippa II.
Now, who was this King Agrippa?
Well, Agrippa was actually known for his understanding of Jewish customs and law.
Ah, so he's not just some random ruler.
No, not at all. He was a key player in this whole situation because his judgment could really influence Paul's fate.
So the stakes are pretty high for Paul here.
Oh, absolutely. He's not just trying to win an argument. He's fighting for his freedom, maybe even his life.
Wow, so how does he approach this? I mean, what's his strategy?
Well, that's what's so brilliant. He starts by acknowledging Agrippa's expertise.
Oh, smart move.
Yeah. He says, I know that you are expert in all customs and controversies of the Jews. He's basically saying, hey, I respect your knowledge. Let me tell you my story.
So he's disarming Agrippa right from the start.
Exactly. He's building a connection, creating a sense of trust.
And then, what, does he jump right into his conversion?
Well, not quite. First, he takes us back to his life as a Pharisee.
Okay, so he's setting the stage.
Right. He's painting a picture of his former zeal for Judaism, how strict he was, how dedicated he was to upholding the law.
Okay, but why is that important?
Well, it makes his conversion all the more impactful. Because think about it, he went from persecuting Christians to becoming one of their most passionate advocates.
Yeah, that's quite a turnaround.
It's a complete 180, and it shows just how profound his transformation was.
So he's using his past to make his present message more powerful.
Exactly. And then, of course, he brings us to that pivotal moment, his encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus.
Okay, so now we're getting to the good stuff.
Right, and he doesn't hold back. He describes the blinding light, the voice from heaven.
It's like something out of a movie.
It really is. But for Paul, this was real life, an experience that shook him to his core,
I can only imagine.
It wasn't just a change of mind, it was a complete change of heart.
So this encounter is the foundation of his whole defense.
Absolutely. He's basically saying, look, I was once like you, skeptical, even hostile, but then something happened that completely changed my life.
It's like he's inviting Agrippa to consider that maybe, just maybe, this could happen to him too.
Exactly. And that's where the power of personal testimony comes in. It's one thing to hear about religious ideas. It's another thing entirely to hear about someone's lived experience.
Especially when that experience is so dramatic and, transformative.
Exactly. And then he lays out his mission, the task given to him by Jesus himself.
Which is?
To open people's eyes, turn them from darkness to light, free them from the power of Satan.
Okay, so some pretty big goals.
Right. He's painting this vivid picture of spiritual awakening.
Interesting. So he's not just presenting Christianity as a set of beliefs. He's framing it as a journey.
Yeah. A movement from one state of being to another. And he uses these really powerful metaphors to drive that point home.
Okay, so he's appealing to something deeper than just logic or reason.
Exactly. He's tapping into that human desire for meaning, for purpose, for something more than just the everyday.
And by weaving his own story into that message, it becomes even more compelling.
Oh, absolutely. It's like he's saying, this isn't just theory, this is reality. This is what happened to me, and it can happen to you too.
But I'm guessing not everyone is buying it.
You're right. And we see this in the reactions of Festus and Agrippa.
Ah, okay. So who's Festus?
Festus was the Roman governor.
Okay.
And he bursts out, "You are out of your mind, Paul. Your great learning is driving you insane."
Wow. He's not holding back.
No, not at all. It's a very blunt dismissal. You can just sense his skepticism.
It's almost comical, right? I mean, this guy who's experienced something truly extraordinary is being labeled as crazy by someone who hasn't even considered the possibility.
It really is, and I think it highlights the clash of worldviews that's happening here.
Okay, explain that.
So Festus is operating from a purely materialistic perspective.
Okay.
Miracles, divine encounters, these things are simply outside his realm of comprehension.
Yeah, I get it. So what about Agrippa? How does he react?
Well, Agrippa responds quite differently. He doesn't mock Paul or dismiss him outright. He's more intrigued.
Intrigued.
In what way? He says something really interesting. He says, "Do you think that in such a short time you can persuade me to be a Christian?"
Huh. So what's going on in his mind? Is he genuinely considering Paul's message, or is he just playing devil's advocate?
It's a question that kind of hangs in the air, and it's one we'll unpack further as we, continue our deep dive.
Sounds good.
But what's clear is that Paul's words have had an impact. They've planted a seed of doubt, a flicker of curiosity.
So it's a reminder that even the most skeptical minds can be touched by a powerful story.
Yeah, especially when that story is delivered with authenticity and conviction. That almost persuaded statement from Agrippa. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, what do you think was going on there?
Well, it kind of gives us this glimpse into the struggle, between belief and doubt. Like he's intellectually curious, but there's also this weight of social pressure.
Right, like becoming a Christian back then, that was a huge decision.
It really was. It wasn't something you just did lightly.
So do you think he was playing it safe? Maybe worried about the political fallout?
It's definitely possible. I mean, think about it. Agrippa's ruling over this diverse population, different religious beliefs, and if he suddenly aligns himself with Christianity,
Yeah, it could cause some serious upheaval.
right, it could be seen as a threat to stability.
So he's caught between these two worlds, drawn to what Paul's saying, but also aware of the potential consequences.
Exactly. It's a dilemma a lot of people face even today, when their beliefs clash with what society expects.
That's like that age-old question. Do you follow your heart or play it safe?
Right. And it's a testament to how skilled Paul was as a communicator.
Yeah.
Because he creates this tension within Agrippa, this internal struggle. He doesn't force a conversion, but he plants a seed.
Which is often how real change happens, right?
Absolutely. It's not about bombarding people with arguments. It's about planting those seeds, sparking that curiosity, and letting them grow over time.
So how does Paul react to Agrippa's hesitation?
Well, his response is really interesting. He doesn't get defensive or frustrated. He actually expresses this heartfelt wish.
Oh, what does he say?
He says, "I would to God that not only you, but also all who hear me today might become what I am, except for these chains."
Wow, there's a lot packed into that statement.
There really is. He acknowledges his own suffering, his imprisonment, but at the same time, he's saying, look, despite all of this, the transformation I've experienced, it's worth it.
It's like he's saying, this path isn't easy, but it's the most incredible journey you'll ever take.
Exactly. And it reminds us that real conviction often comes at a cost.
Right. Like, Paul isn't sugarcoating the challenges of following Jesus, but he's also emphasizing the reward.
Yes, the reward of a life transformed by grace.
And this brings us to the core of his defense, right?
Yeah, it's not just about clearing his name. It's about making a case for the power of faith.
The power to actually change your life.
Exactly. He's using his own life as an example, as proof that God can change hearts and minds. And that's what makes his message so compelling, even centuries later.
It's not just an abstract theological argument. It's real. It's something he's lived through.
Right. And it makes you think, how do we engage with a text like this today? What can we learn from it, even if we don't share Paul's beliefs?
That's a great question. I mean, it's a story from a very different time and culture.
It is, but I think one of the key takeaways is the importance of storytelling.
Right, how Paul uses his own story to connect with Agrippa.
Exactly. He doesn't just preach at him, he draws him in. He makes him feel the impact of that encounter with Jesus.
It's like he's painting a picture with his words.
He really is. He's not just stating facts, he's creating this emotional connection. And that's something that transcends any belief system,
So whether we're talking about faith, politics, even just our personal lives, stories have the power to move us in ways that just logic can't.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that sometimes the most effective way to communicate is to just share our stories, to be vulnerable, to let those experiences speak for themselves.
I like that.
And another takeaway I think is important is empathy.
Empathy. How does that play into it?
Well, think about it. Paul has these strong convictions, but he doesn't demonize or dismiss those who disagree.
That's true. He even says he wants Agrippa to experience the same transformation.
Exactly. He acknowledges Agrippa's perspective, he respects his position, and he expresses this desire to connect with him on a deeper level.
Which is so different from how we often approach disagreements today.
It really is. It's like we're so quick to judge, to dismiss, to create this us versus them mentality.
Yeah.
But Paul models a different approach, one that emphasizes understanding, respect, a willingness to engage with those who see things differently.
And in a world that feels increasingly divided, that's a really important lesson.
It is. And as we're wrapping up this section on Acts 26, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay, what's that?
Paul's defense, even though it's set in the specific historical and religious context, it speaks to something universal.
Like what?
That human desire for meaning, for purpose, for something more than just the everyday.
That search for something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. That yearning for something that can ground us, guide us, transform us. And while the answers to those questions might look different for each person, the search itself, that's something we all share.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
And regardless of what you believe, Paul's story can inspire us to keep searching, to keep exploring, to keep seeking out what truly sets our hearts on fire.
So as we move on, I'm curious, what resonated most with you in Paul's story? What sparked your curiosity? Or maybe even challenged some of your assumptions?
And for those listening who already know this passage well, what new insights did you gain today? Did anything make you rethink your understanding of Paul's defense?
One thing that I find really interesting is how Paul connects his story to a bigger picture, a theological framework.
Okay, so he's not just sharing a random anecdote.
Right, like he doesn't just talk about that experience on the road to Damascus. He actually links it back to the Jewish scriptures.
So he's showing how it all fits together.
Exactly. He's highlighting this continuity between what he believes now and the prophecies from the past.
Okay, and why is that so important? Especially when he's talking to King Agrippa. Well, because Agrippa's steeped in Jewish tradition, right? So Paul's basically demonstrating that becoming a Christian isn't about abandoning your heritage.
It's about seeing it through a new lens.
Exactly. It's this new perspective that reveals how those ancient prophecies are fulfilled in Jesus.
So he's building a bridge between the old and the new.
He really is. And that makes his message a lot more palatable to someone like Agrippa, who might be hesitant about straying too far from traditional Judaism.
It's a smart strategy. I mean, he's meeting Agrippa where he's at.
Right. Using familiar language and concepts to introduce something new and potentially challenging.
It's like he's saying, hey, this isn't as radical as you think. Let me show you how it all connects.
Exactly. And I think there's a valuable lesson in that for all of us. Regardless of our own beliefs, effective communication is about understanding your audience, finding common ground, building bridges.
It's about making those connections, respecting different backgrounds and beliefs, and then gently guiding them towards a new way of seeing things.
Well said. And Paul's defense before Agrippa is a perfect example of that kind of nuanced communication.
We've talked a lot about Agrippa's reaction, that whole almost persuaded thing.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what do you think was holding him back? Was it really just political concerns? Or could there have been something else going on?
That's a good question. I mean, it's impossible to know for sure what was going on in Agrippa's mind.
Right. We can't read his thoughts.
But I think it's safe to say that faith is a complex thing. It's rarely a simple yes or no decision.
Yeah, there are often a lot of factors at play.
Exactly. There could be layers of doubt, fear, maybe even pressure from others that all influence our beliefs.
So even if Agrippa was intellectually convinced by Paul's arguments, there might have been other things holding him back from fully committing.
Exactly. And that's something I think we can all relate to on some level. Even when we encounter compelling evidence or a story that resonates with us, there are these internal and external barriers that make it difficult to fully embrace something new.
Right? It's not always easy to change our way of thinking, even when we want to.
Absolutely. And that's what makes Paul's story so encouraging. He went through a dramatic transformation himself, facing a lot of opposition and hardship for his faith.
It wasn't an easy path for him.
No, not at all. But he ultimately found freedom and purpose in following Jesus.
And that's the message he's offering to Agrippa and all of us. It's a message of hope that even in the midst of doubt and uncertainty, real transformation is possible.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to emphasize that Acts 26 isn't just a historical account. It's a living story that still speaks to us today.
It's a story that challenges us to look at our own beliefs, to be open to new perspectives, and to have those tough conversations with empathy and respect.
Yes, and it reminds us that the search for truth is a journey that's worth taking, a journey that can lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves, the world, and our place in it all.
Well said. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Acts 26.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've enjoyed this conversation, that it sparked some curiosity or maybe even challenged you to see things in a new light.
And remember, the Bible isn't just some ancient text. It's full of stories and teachings that still resonate with us today. So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and let these ancient words speak to your heart and mind.
Until next time, keep diving deep.